I showed up 45 minutes late to my father's funeral, wearing a wrinkled $3,000 suit that smelled like whiskey and regret. My head was pounding from the party I'd thrown the night before, a pre-inheritance celebration at a rooftop bar in Manhattan. I hadn't shed a single tear when I got the call that Jonathan Stone, Wall Street legend, and my father had died. Instead, I'd popped champagne. The church was packed with people I'd never met, business partners, politicians, celebrities, everyone pretending to be sad while secretly wondering how much of the $340 million fortune they'd get mentioned in the will. I pushed through the crowd and took my seat in the front row, checking my phone every few minutes. My real estate agent had sent me listings for penthouses in Tribeca. My car dealer had a McLaren P1 on hold. I'd already mentally spent $50 million before my father was even in the ground. The priest droned on about Dad's generous spirit and dedication to helping others. I almost laughed. Jonathan Stone was a shark. He'd made his fortune destroying companies, firing thousands of people, and treating employees like machines. The only thing he ever gave me was a monthly allowance and a lifetime of disappointment. He'd missed every birthday, every graduation, every moment that mattered. Now he was dead, and finally, he was going to be useful to me. When they lowered the casket into the ground, I didn't cry. I smiled. My nightmare was over. My real life was about to begin. 3 days later, I sat in a glass conference room at my father's law firm, drumming my fingers on the mahogany table. Arthur Lowell walked in with a leather folder tucked under his arm. Arthur had been my father's attorney for 20 years, a smooth-talking guy with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. I'd never liked him, but today he was my favorite person in the world. He held the keys to my kingdom. "Tyler," Arthur said, sitting down across from me, "thank you for coming." "Let's just get this over with," I said, grinning. "Read the will so I can get to the bank." Arthur opened the folder slowly, like he was savoring the moment. He cleared his throat. To my son, Tyler Stone, I leave nothing." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. What? Your father's entire estate, $340 million in cash, stocks, real estate, and assets, has been placed in a permanent trust for the Hale Children's Home. You've been completely disinherited. I jumped to my feet. That's impossible. I'm his only son. This is illegal. Arthur slid a thick document across the table. It's entirely legal. Your father updated his will 6 months ago. He was of sound mind and body. You get nothing. My hands were shaking. I'll fight this. I'll sue. You can try, Arthur said, pulling out a sealed red envelope. But there is one option, a clause your father included. A way back to the inheritance. But it's locked for 12 months, and the terms are difficult. I lunged for the envelope, but Arthur pulled it back. Not yet. You'll receive instructions within 48 hours. Until then, Mr. Stone, I suggest you figure out how you're going to pay your rent. He stood up and walked out, leaving me alone in that glass room, watching my entire future shatter like dropped crystal. By the time I left the law firm, my life had already started falling apart. My credit card stopped working at a coffee shop. When I tried to go home to my luxury apartment in Soho, the doorman physically blocked me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stone, but the landlord has terminated your lease due to anticipated financial default. Your belongings have been placed in storage." I stood on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. My phone kept buzzing, text messages from friends who'd heard the news. Except they weren't checking on me, they were cutting ties. "Hey man, I can't make drinks tonight. Sorry, but I need that $5,000 you borrowed. Lost your number. Who is this?" I checked my bank account. $127.42. That's what I had left after a lifetime of spending money I never earned. I'd never had a real job. never paid a bill, never cooked a meal. I was 28 years old and completely useless. That night, I ended up in a motel in Queens that charged by the hour. The room smelled like cigarettes and cleaning chemicals. The sheets were stained. The TV only got 3 channels. I lay on the bed, staring at the water-damaged ceiling, and felt the weight of my situation crush down on me. I had no skills, no work experience, no one who cared if I lived or died. My phone buzzed one more time. A video notification. Someone had filmed me outside my apartment building, arguing with the doorman, looking desperate and pathetic. The video had 2 million views. The top comment said, "Rich kid gets what he deserves. This is what karma looks like." I threw my phone across the room and cried for the first time since my mother died when I was 7. 2 days later, Arthur called me. His voice was warm and concerned, completely different from the cold tone he'd used in the conference room. "Tyler, I've been thinking about you. I feel terrible about how things went down. Your father was my friend, and I can't stand seeing you like this." He invited me to meet him at a diner on the edge of the city. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. I was starving, scared, and desperate. When I walked into that diner, Arthur was waiting in a booth with a menu already open. "Order whatever you want," he said. "It's on me." I ordered a burger, fries, and coffee. I ate like an animal, barely breathing between bites. Arthur watched me with something like pity in his eyes. "I've been going through your father's paperwork," Arthur said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "There's a loophole, a monthly stipend I can unlock from the estate. It's not much, maybe $3,000 a month, but it's enough to get you back on your feet while you figure things out." I grabbed the folder. Inside were legal documents with words I didn't understand. Power of attorney, liability waiver, asset reallocation authorization. "What is all this?" I asked. "Just standard paperwork," Arthur said smoothly. "The estate lawyers need you to sign off on some technical details so they can release the stipend. It's all routine." In my old life, I would have had 3 lawyers review every word. But I wasn't in my old life anymore. I was broke, homeless, and terrified. Arthur pushed a pen across the table. "Will this really get me money?" I asked. "Absolutely," Arthur lied, his smile warm and reassuring. I signed. I signed every page without reading them. Arthur collected the papers and patted my shoulder. "You made the right choice, Tyler. Things are going to get better." But they didn't. The stipend never came, and I just handed Arthur the weapon he'd been waiting for. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at my motel. Inside was a single sheet of paper with instructions typed in cold, legal language. Inheritance clause, final option. Tyler Stone is eligible to reclaim his inheritance under the following non-negotiable terms. 1. Complete 12 consecutive months of full-time employment at Hale Children's Home. 2. Live on-site in staff housing with no outside accommodations. 3. Earn written recommendation from the Board of Directors. 4. Any absence, refusal of work, or violation of conduct results in permanent disinheritance. 5. Sealed instructions will be revealed only upon successful completion. I read the letter 3 times. A year of working at an orphanage for $340 million? The math was simple. That was roughly 2,000 hours of work for $170,000 per hour. It was the easiest money I'd ever make. I didn't care about helping kids. I didn't believe in redemption or second chances. This was purely business. I'd fake being a good person for 12 months, get my inheritance, and disappear to a beach in Thailand. I'd smile for the cameras, mop the floors, and count down every single day. I had no idea that my father hadn't just left me a challenge. He'd left me a trap. And the moment I walked through those orphanage doors, everything I thought I knew about myself, my father, and the world would be destroyed. I packed my single bag. Everything I owned fit into one duffel, and took a bus across the city. As the buildings rolled past the window, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let these people change me. I wouldn't get attached. I'd do my time and get out. It was the last promise I'd ever make to the old Tyler Stone. Hale Children's Home looked like something out of a horror movie. The Victorian building was falling apart, cracked windows, peeling paint, and a roof that sagged in the middle like a broken back. The front lawn was mostly dirt and weeds. A rusted swing set creaked in the wind. This was where my father grew up? No wonder he became so obsessed with money. Maria Santos met me at the front door. She was maybe 65, built like a bulldog, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that looked straight through me. She glanced at my designer shoes and let out a short, harsh laugh. "You're the son," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Tyler Stone. I'm here to fulfill the terms of—" "I know why you're here," Maria interrupted. "You're here because you're broke and desperate. You're here because you want money. You're not here for these kids." My face went hot. "I'm here to work." "Good," Maria said, opening the door. "The basement flooded last night. There's 3 inches of water and 50 boxes of ruined supplies. Here's a mop, here's a bucket. Get moving." She grabbed my phone right out of my hand and locked it in her office desk. "No distractions during work hours. You'll get it back at 8 p.m. For the next 10 hours, I scooped water, hauled soaking boxes, and scrubbed mud off concrete floors. My hands blistered, my back screamed. Sweat soaked through my shirt. The kids, there were 47 of them living here, watched me work. They whispered to each other and laughed when I slipped in the mud. "Nice shoes, rich boy," one teenager called out. I wanted to quit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call a lawyer and sue my father's estate for emotional distress. But I couldn't. I had nowhere else to go. This was my life now. That night, I collapsed on a narrow bed in a tiny staff room. Everything hurt. I smelled like mold and bleach. I pulled out a small notebook and wrote, "Day 1 of 365. Only 364 days to go." His name was Eli, and he hated me from the start. He was 12 years old, skinny as a rail, with angry eyes and a chip on his shoulder the size of Manhattan. Every afternoon, he sat on the rusted fire escape outside the second-floor window, writing furiously in a beat-up notebook. I was taking out recycling during my 3rd week when I walked past him. I glanced over his shoulder out of habit. I used to analyze spreadsheets for a living, so numbers just catch my eye. What I saw made me stop dead. He was doing calculus, advanced calculus, derivatives, limits, integrals, college-level math that I'd barely survived at Wharton Business School. "Your derivative is wrong," I said without thinking. "You forgot to apply the chain rule." Eli looked up at me like I'd just insulted his mother. "What do you know? You're just the janitor." My ego flared up. I couldn't help it. "I went to Wharton. I worked as a financial analyst before this. Let me show you." I sat down on the metal grating and took his pencil. "Look, when you're taking the derivative of a composite function, you have to—" "I know what the chain rule is," snatching the pencil back. "I'm not stupid." "I didn't say you were stupid. I said you made a mistake. There's a difference." Eli studied me for a long moment. "You're Tyler Stone, the guy who lost everything." "Yeah." "Good," Eli said coldly. "Rich people don't know anything about real life. You won't last a month here." He climbed back through the window and disappeared, leaving me sitting on that fire escape alone. But something had shifted. For the first time in weeks, I'd felt like myself again. Not the fake version who smiled for cameras or the desperate version who begged for scraps. The version who was good at something. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Eli. A 12-year-old kid doing college math in a falling-apart orphanage. What was his story? Where were his parents? Why was he so angry? And why did I suddenly care? 3 months in, my body had adapted to the hard labor. My soft, gym-trained muscles had been replaced with actual working man strength. My hands were calloused. My back didn't hurt anymore. I could haul 50-pound bags of supplies without breaking a sweat. But my brain was waking up too, and that's when I noticed the discrepancies. I was fixing a broken filing cabinet in Maria's office when I saw an invoice sitting on her desk. I shouldn't have looked. It wasn't my business, but old habits die hard. The moment I saw the numbers, my analyst brain kicked into overdrive. Nutritional supplies, monthly invoice, $15,000. I froze. I knew exactly what we were eating because I was the one cooking half the meals. Powdered eggs, stale bread, watered-down juice, generic pasta. We were feeding 47 kids on what looked like a $3,000 a month budget, maybe less. So where was the other $12,000 going? I looked closer at the vendor name, AL Logistics LLC. My stomach dropped. AL, Arthur Lowell. I glanced at the door. Maria was outside dealing with a kid who'd gotten in a fight, and quickly shuffled through the other papers. My hands started shaking as I found more invoices. Roof repairs that never happened, heating oil deliveries that never arrived, security system upgrades for a system that didn't exist. Every single fake invoice traced back to companies with AL in the name. Arthur wasn't just managing the trust, he was bleeding it dry. He was stealing from the orphanage, from these kids, to fund his own lifestyle. And suddenly, this wasn't about my inheritance anymore. It was about 47 kids who were eating powdered eggs while Arthur Lowell bought himself a vacation home. I took photos of the invoices with my phone, my hands shaking with rage. I didn't know what I was going to do with the evidence yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to burn Arthur Lowell's world to the ground. Why do you care? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Eli was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, watching me examine the invoices I'd spread across the table. It was nearly midnight. I'd thought everyone was asleep. I don't care, I said automatically, trying to shove the papers back into the folder. The numbers don't make sense. You're lying. Eli walked closer, his eyes scanning the documents. Despite being 12, he was sharp enough to understand what he was seeing. Arthur's stealing from us. Yeah. So what are you going to do about it? Eli asked, his voice hard. Run away? Pretend you didn't see it? That's what rich people do, right? Ignore problems that don't affect them? His words hit me like a slap. That's not fair. Isn't it? Eli crossed his arms. You've been here for 3 months, and everyone knows why. You're counting down the days until you get your money and disappear. You don't actually care about us. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But he wasn't. 3 months ago, he would have been absolutely right. But something had changed. I'd spent 3 months sleeping in the same building as these kids. I'd tutored them in math. I'd fixed their broken beds and cooked their meals and listened to their stories. I knew which kids had nightmares. I knew which ones were being bullied. I knew which ones cried themselves to sleep, missing parents who were never coming back. Your dad grew up here, I said quietly. Eli nodded. Maria showed me his photo. He used to sit on the same fire escape I do. I looked at the invoices again, at the proof that Arthur was stealing the roof from over these kids' heads. My father had grown up here. He'd slept in these same beds, eaten in this same kitchen. And somehow he'd clawed his way out and built an empire. And now his old attorney was destroying the one place that had saved him. I'm going to fix this, I said without thinking. The heater? No, I said, everything. I stopped counting the days until I got my inheritance. I started counting the days until I had enough evidence to destroy Arthur Lowell. During the day, I worked my assigned tasks, painting walls, fixing broken equipment, tutoring kids in the library.
But at night, I became someone else. I became the analyst I used to be, except this time I wasn't working for a paycheck. I was working for revenge. I dug through the dumpster behind the admin building, carefully piecing together shredded documents. I used the library computer to track down business registrations for Arthur's fake vendor companies. I cross-referenced dates and amounts, building a timeline of theft that stretched back 3 years. But what I found was so much worse. Arthur had been using the Hale Trust's real estate, the actual buildings and land, as collateral to open massive margin trading accounts. He was making huge bets in the stock market, gambling with money that was supposed to feed and house these kids. And he was losing, badly. The financial records showed Arthur had taken short positions on major tech companies, betting their stock prices would crash. But the market kept going up. Arthur was drowning in margin calls, demands from his broker to cover his losses immediately. So he was draining the orphanage's operating budget to keep his positions open, praying the market would eventually turn in his favor. It wouldn't. I'd worked in finance long enough to know Arthur was making amateur mistakes, chasing losses, over-leveraging, ignoring risk management. He was going to lose everything. And when he did, the banks would seize Hale Children's Home. 47 kids would be scattered into a broken foster system. All because Arthur Lowell couldn't admit he'd made a bad bet. I sat in the dark library at 2 a.m., staring at the spreadsheet I'd built, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. I wasn't doing this for money. I was doing this because it was right. The old Tyler Stone was dead, and I didn't miss him at all.
Month 11 arrived. The board review. This was supposed to be my final test, the moment where the board of directors evaluated my performance and decided if I'd earned back my inheritance. I'd been preparing for weeks, getting letters of recommendation from Maria and the kids, documenting all the work I'd done. I walked into the boardroom wearing a thrift store suit that I'd bought with my own money I'd earned doing odd jobs around the neighborhood on weekends. It fit better than any designer suit I'd ever owned. Arthur was already there, sitting at the head of the table with 3 board members I'd never met. He gave me that same shark smile. "Mr. Stone," he began, his voice dripping with false warmth, "has certainly shown dedication over the past 11 months. However," that single word made my blood run cold. "However," Arthur continued, "we've discovered serious irregularities in the orphanage's financial records." He dropped a thick folder on the table. "Evidence of systematic embezzlement. It appears Tyler has been forging signatures and transferring funds to offshore accounts." My mind went blank. "What? That's insane! I never—" "The evidence is quite clear," Arthur said, sliding papers across the table to the board members. "Bank records, transfer authorizations, all bearing Tyler's signature." I grabbed the papers and my heart stopped. They were the documents I'd signed in the diner months ago, the ones Arthur had claimed were for a stipend. He'd doctored them, adding false bank account numbers and transfer amounts. He'd used my own desperate signatures to frame me. "This is a setup," I shouted, standing up. "He's lying. He's the one stealing from the orphanage." "I understand you're upset," Arthur said calmly, "but the evidence speaks for itself. The board has no choice. You've failed the character requirement. The inheritance clause is void. You get nothing." The board members were already standing, gathering their papers, avoiding my eyes. They'd made their decision before I even walked into the room. Security grabbed my arms and dragged me toward the door. I saw Arthur's reflection in the window, and he was smiling. I'd been outplayed. I sat on the curb outside Hale, my head in my hands. I'd lost. After 11 months of hell, of changing myself, of actually becoming someone worth something, I'd still lost. My phone buzzed. A text from Eli. Don't give up. Do the math. Do the math. I looked at the message for a long moment, and something clicked in my brain. Arthur had made a mistake. He was so confident in his frame job that he'd gotten sloppy. The forged documents had dates and timestamps, IP addresses, digital fingerprints, and Arthur didn't know that I'd spent the last 8 months teaching myself forensic accounting in the library. I pulled out my phone and called the one person who might actually listen to me, Sophia Kane, an investigative financial journalist who'd written a brutal article about me a year ago when I was still the worthless rich kid. "Tyler Stone," she answered, sounding amused, "calling to beg me to stop writing about your spectacular failure?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm calling because I can prove Arthur Lowell is running a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme using a children's charity as a front." Silence on the line. Then, "I'm listening. The invoices, the margin trading, the frame job, I have all of it. Spreadsheets, photos, bank records. But I need your help to make it public before he destroys the evidence." "Meet me in 1 hour," Sophia said. "And Tyler, this better not be another rich boy sob story." "It's not," I said. "It's a takedown." We met in the parking garage of her newspaper building. I spread out months of evidence across the hood of her car: invoices, bank statements, trading records, metadata analysis. Sophia's eyes got wider with every page. "This is massive," she whispered. "Securities fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement from a charity. Arthur could get 20 years for this." "Can you publish it?" "If I can verify the sources, this is front-page material." She looked at me carefully. "Why are you doing this? You could walk away, start over somewhere else." I thought about Eli, about Maria, about 47 kids who deserved better than being collateral damage in Arthur's greed. "Because someone has to," I said simply. Sophia grinned. "You're not the same person I wrote about last year." "No," I agreed. "I'm not." The article dropped at 6 a.m. Wall Street attorney loots orphanage trust in massive fraud scheme. Sophia's story was devastating. She'd spent the night verifying every detail, calling sources, checking facts. The article laid out Arthur's entire operation: the fake vendor companies, the margin trading, the frame job on me. She'd even found other clients Arthur had stolen from over the years. By 8 a.m., Arthur's law firm's stock price had crashed. By 9 a.m., federal investigators were executing search warrants at his office. By 10 a.m., news vans were parked outside Hale Children's Home. I stood on the front porch with Maria, watching the chaos unfold. Arthur came running out of the admin building, carrying a box of shredded documents, his face pale and panicked. I stepped into his path. "Going somewhere, Arthur?" I asked calmly. He stopped, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. You did this! You destroyed me!" "No," I said. "You destroyed yourself. I just showed everyone what you really are." "I was going to pay it back," Arthur screamed. "One more trade, just one more, and I would have covered everything." "That's what every addict says," I replied. "The market doesn't care about your intentions, it only cares about results." FBI agents swarmed around us. I watched as they put handcuffs on Arthur Lowell and read him his rights. He looked at me one last time, and all I saw was a pathetic man who'd gambled everything and lost. It was the best moment of my life. Better than any party, any purchase, any thrill I'd chased in my old life. Because this wasn't about me. It was about justice. As they pushed Arthur into the police car, Maria put a hand on my shoulder. "Your father would be proud." I wasn't so sure, but for the first time, I was proud of myself. But there was a problem, a big one. Despite Arthur's arrest, the board's vote still stood. Technically, I'd failed the character clause because of the scandal, even though I was innocent. The inheritance was still locked away, and now with Arthur under arrest, there was no one to authorize releasing it. I'd won the battle, but lost the war.
I went back to my tiny staff room and started packing. I had maybe $800 saved from doing odd jobs, enough for a security deposit on a terrible apartment and a few weeks of groceries while I looked for work. "Where do you think you're going?" Maria was standing in the doorway, holding the red envelope, the sealed one, the one Arthur had mentioned on my first day, the one with the secret clause. "The board voted," I said. "I'm out." "The board doesn't matter," Maria said, her hands shaking as she held the envelope. "Your father left very specific instructions with the bank. This envelope was to be given to you only under one condition: if Arthur Lowell was removed as executor for criminal misconduct." My heart started pounding. "What? Open it," Maria said, handing it to me. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. My father's handwriting, something I'd only seen on birthday cards he'd forgotten to sign. "Tyler, if you're reading this, two things have happened. You've hit rock bottom, and you've taken down Arthur." I knew Arthur was stealing for months. I suspected it, but couldn't prove it. I was dying, and I didn't have time. I knew if I left you the money directly, Arthur would manipulate you, steal everything, and you'd let him because you were too weak to fight back. So I had to hide the money from him by hiding it from you. I had to force you to become the man who could outsmart him. The year at Hale wasn't punishment. It was training. The money is yours, all $340 million. But more importantly, the choice of what to do with it is yours. Choose wisely. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My father had planned everything: the disinheritance, the impossible challenge, the red envelope. He'd known Arthur was a snake, and he'd used me as bait to catch him. But he'd also bet that I could change, that underneath the entitled, selfish rich kid was someone worth saving. And somehow, impossibly, he'd been right.
The bank confirmed it the next day. The full inheritance, $340 million plus investment growth over the past year, was mine. No restrictions, no conditions, just a simple wire transfer whenever I wanted it. I sat in Maria's office with Eli, staring at the bank statement on the computer screen. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. "So what are you going to do?" Eli asked quietly. I thought about the old Tyler, the one who'd shown up late to his father's funeral dreaming of penthouses and sports cars. That guy would already be on a private jet to Monaco. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'm going to set up a permanent endowment," I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke. "Not a trust that can be raided, a real foundation with independent oversight. We'll rebuild Hale completely. New building, new programs, full college scholarships for every kid who comes through here." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Tyler." "I'll keep a salary," I continued, "something reasonable, enough to live on. The rest goes into the foundation." "Why?" Eli asked. For the first time since I'd met him, his voice wasn't angry. It was confused. "You earned that money. You could do anything." I looked at him, this smart, angry kid who'd been abandoned by the world. "Because my father was right. The money isn't the point. The choice is the point." I stood up and held out my hand to Eli. "Besides, I'm going to need help. Think you can handle managing a $340 million foundation while you're in high school?" Eli stared at my hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he shook it. "Yeah," he said, "I can do that." "And that's how compound interest works," I said, pointing to the equation on the board. My class of 25 foster kids groaned, but they were taking notes. We were in the new STEM building of the Jonathan Stone Center for Youth, a state-of-the-art facility we'd built on the site of the old Hale Children's Home. I wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a polo shirt with our foundation logo. I'd been teaching here full-time for 4 years while Eli was at MIT.
He was graduating next month, top of his class, and he'd already accepted a position as our foundation's director of operations. The kid who'd hated me 5 years ago was now basically my little brother. After class, I walked outside to the dedication ceremony for our newest building, a music and arts center funded entirely by the foundation. Sophia was waiting by the stage. We'd been married for 3 years now. "Ready?" she asked, taking my hand. "Ready." I stepped up to the microphone and looked at the crowd. Hundreds of kids, donors, volunteers, and staff. 5 years ago, I'd stood at my father's funeral and felt nothing. Today, looking at what we'd built, I felt everything. "My father left me nothing," I said into the microphone, "and it was the greatest gift he ever gave me." The crowd laughed. I smiled. "He didn't leave me nothing because he didn't love me. He left me nothing because he loved me enough to let me find out who I really was. And who I really was had nothing to do with the balance in my bank account." I saw Eli in the front row, grinning. "So if you're watching this and you feel like you've lost everything, like the world took it all away, I want you to remember something. Rock bottom is the strongest foundation you'll ever build on. Trust me, I've been there." Arthur Lowell is currently in year 4 of a 15-year federal prison sentence. I sent him one letter during his trial. It said, "The math always wins." I drive a Toyota now. I work 60 hours a week. I haven't checked the stock market in years. Sometimes late at night, I sit on my porch and read my father's letter again. "I left you nothing so you could find everything." He was right. If I'd inherited that money the day he died, I'd be dead or broke by now. Arthur would have picked me clean, and I would have let him, because I didn't know how to fight for anything. The year at Hale didn't just save my inheritance, it saved my life. Next month we're breaking ground on our 3rd facility, this one in Chicago. We're creating a national network of centers, all funded by the endowment. We've helped over 500 kids in 5 years. 50 of them are in college right now. I still have that wrinkled Armani suit from the funeral. It hangs in the back of my closet as a reminder of who I used to be. A hollow man in expensive clothes who had everything and meant nothing. That man is dead. My name is Tyler Stone. I inherited $340 million, and I gave most of it away. And I've never been richer. The end. Subscribe if you believe in second chances. Like if you've ever felt like you lost everything. Share if you know someone who needs to hear this story.